Welcome to Coming About with David Paragamian, the podcast that dives deep into the minds of leaders who have transformed their businesses and industries, paving the way for a better future. Here's Dave.
Welcome to Coming About. My guest today is Ray Rosti, the president of media at Klick Health and a veteran of healthcare advertising and marketing with more than 25 years of experience, including a long stint at Publicis Health Media. He's known for building pioneering teams and strategies for his clients. At Klick, Ray is focused on integrating media into full commercialization strategies and leading at the intersection of data, technology, and healthcare. Ray, welcome to Coming About.
Thanks for having me, Dave. It's really good to see you.
Why don't we start with the origin part of the story? Because I always find that fascinating. How did you know when you were coming out of college or university, hey, I want to jump into this crazy thing called advertising or media? How did all that begin?
I didn't, like a lot
As it usually happens, we didn't.
Well, to say it a nice way, I was probably a bit lost, as a young man. I started out college as a science major. At one point I thought I wanted to be a chiropractor. I realized that high science wasn't for me. I switched into business and, I took a few courses on marketing and really found that I loved it. It was, it were the classes where I actually got really good grades. I found myself talking to the teachers after class. I felt, I could relate. And I think it has a lot to do with my upbringing. I joke that I was raised by the television, but I spent a lot of my formative years in the 80s, watching a lot of television, the dawn of cable television, the dawn of MTV, and kind of like that decade of consumerism. So, I think the sort of amount of time I saw television commercials, advertising, knowing the influence it had on me as far as me wanting products, I think, created this curiosity of like, why does that happen? And I grew up in a sort of modest middle-class upbringing. My parents were super frugal. And, when things like Air Jordans came out and I wanted them, my parents would push back and say, you're just paying for the logo. And my mom would joke that I can draw that logo on a cheaper pair of sneakers for you. And that she was always talking about like adding logos to clothes and whatnot. So, I think that curiosity really is what fueled my engagement in marketing and media. And, when I started focusing on that in my college career, I felt like I found my place. I felt like it was something that was really interesting to me. But I was also a non-traditional student. I worked as I went to school. I took a year off because I was in that sort of lost period. But as I was working, one of my first jobs was working at Rowan Rohr Pharmaceuticals, assembling clinical trial data for Nasacort. So taking reams and reams of clinical trial results and packaging them up for the FDA. So that was my first sort of introduction to healthcare and pharma. From there, I also had a stint at NovaCare's corporate headquarters, processing Medicare reimbursement for the different rehab facilities. So sort of that's where media and healthcare started to intersect for me. But when I finished my degree, I'm old enough to answer a job posting in the newspaper. I landed at an internet startup called VerticalNet in the suburbs of Philly. And that was my introduction to digital. It was one thing I was sure of when I came out of college is I did not want to do sales. And that was a lot of the sort of opportunities that were being presented to me. So this was like my first true opportunity to do marketing. And, I was employee number 30 of a company that grew to over 700. And like a lot of internet startups, it crashed. But in those 4 years, I learned so much, got to do so much. And I loved the dawn of, at the time we called it internet marketing, not digital marketing. And I just felt like I was on the ground floor and really found something that I just loved. I just thought it was so interesting, and it kind of really focused my career in the digital space.
Ray, you've said a bunch of smart things that I want to touch on. First and foremost, I didn't know that my mom was in your house raising you at the same time, because I got in trouble for watching too much TV and for wanting things with expensive brand logos. So we had the same upbringing. But one of the other things that you were just saying that I think is so fascinating is that you talked about being at VerticalNet, I think was the name of the company, for 4 years, and then you used the word crashed. And so I think sounds like that's where the first career pivot and moment of resilience had to be, right? Because that crashes and you pivot off to Publicis at the time, I believe, right?
Actually, no. I had 2 stops before Publicis. When the internet crashed, I said, "I need to get to a stable industry." So, I went to insurance doing digital marketing. And it was a very culturally different organization than I was used to. I just worked at a faster pace. I was getting stuff done. I was handing stuff in, and, like, there was a bit of, like, disbelief that, like, I was getting stuff done so quickly, and then it was, a lot of waiting of getting stuff implemented on website changes. I was very much a jack of all trades marketer at that time. It was for affinity marketing for Aon Insurance, and I met someone. I had a group of people there that were really passionate about digital, that kind of my people there, and one of the guys that I worked with really believed in sort of specialization, going from a generalist to a specialist. And he was big in search and SEO, and kind of like influenced my focus in that area as well. So I was at Aon for 2 years. Um, I realized I wanted to get back to like that startup, fast paced mentality of a workplace. I did a short stint at Drexel University. They were one of the first universities to have an online degree that was accredited. So your degree did not say that it was an online degree. It was just a Drexel University degree. So, and what they were trying to do was take that framework of how they record and sort of monitor attendance, and that whole process of online learning, and sell it to other universities. I only did a short stint there because, quite frankly, I was just oversold on the role and what was possible. And during that time, Razorfish just called me for a role in SEO. And, Razorfish just had such a great reputation in the industry. And kind of like, it was the one, I thought I wanted to go to an agency, and then I went and interviewed with a lot of agencies, and I had a really terrible experience. That's why I went to Drexel. And then when Razorfish called, I kind of explained to the recruiter, like, I had a terrible experience. People were not polite. People didn't even show up to interviews. They hadn't read my resume. And the recruiter at times, like, just come talk to us. Like, I think we're different. And I knew of Razorfish's reputation, and he was right. It was such a different experience, and it was an opportunity. Even though I was only 3 months at Drexel, I just felt like it was an opportunity I had to take based on just the experience I had in the interview process. And that was really my foray into the Publicis family, pre-Publicis acquisition. And it was a role in their SEO department. It was SEO for Razorfish was consolidated or hubbed within Philadelphia. So all Razorfish SEO work came through Philadelphia. And they were at the very infancy of SEO. So it was very much come in and help us build out this practice and offering in the marketplace. And that was like super appealing to me.
Yeah, and I think for the listener, there's some really great nuggets of wisdom, particularly for people earlier in their careers, right? I mean, first part of the storytelling was healthcare was a serendipity from getting a part-time job at Rhone-Poulenc Royer, moving around paperwork on clinical trials, but that turned into passion for pharmaceuticals and healthcare. And then also the perseverance to know, okay, so this insurance company isn't for me, but the ad agency world is, and the bravery, to go do that. I wonder, you were also doing this at a time where you used this vocabulary of, well, first we called it internet marketing, then we called it digital marketing. And you and I both know now today, like, if I see a company that talks about digital marketing, I think, man, you're behind. You've already lost. Like, it isn't internet marketing. It isn't digital marketing. It's marketing. And so you were at the pioneering front end of this, which I find so fascinating. And also that advice about specialization. So when you joined the Razorfish and got your first steps into ultimately Publicis, it sounds like you were very focused on SEO. What were the things along the way then? Because you became a generalist and became a general manager and a president of agency. So tell me a little bit about what were some of those learnings and steps, Ray, that allowed you to get broader from that initial sort of specialization?
I mean, I think it honestly starts with culture, and what was true about the culture of Razorfish as a whole, but especially Razorfish Philadelphia, it was very much a flat organization in sort of how you interacted. So you had access to the most senior people, but the most senior people actually listened and they valued your point of view. They valued your perspective, and they listened to ideas on how to make things better. I think that gave everyone permission to improve. And I always remember, like, you think about certain things that influence the way in which you manage. And I had a manager at the time. I was very much a I see everything broken person. And I went into his office and he gave me one of these. He's like, do not come in here unless you have a solution to whatever you're going to complain about. And that I needed to hear that because it gave me the permission to come with ideas. And he was very receptive and said, go, try it, do it, fix it. You have my permission. And I think that really opened a door for me to go from being a part of like the SEO team and really driving the way in which we worked, the way in which we showed up. We didn't have simple things like consistency in our deliverables. My deliverables look different than my peers. Our reporting looked very different. So sort of going from like a project by project type of offering to an actual service level offering that looks and feels like the organization was where I was able to focus. I had that permission, and that allowed us, I think, contributed to our growth, the speed and efficiency in which we worked. We created new roles in SEO. SEO was really a generalist, and I was able to convince the leadership that we needed to break it out into technology and content strategy. I feel like we were one of the first to do that. And it made a huge difference because it brought different perspectives. Our content strategists were storytellers with data, and really focused on audience behaviors, where our tech team was really focused on the algorithm and how to sort of solve the puzzle of the algorithm. And that focus, I think, allowed me eventually to grow into a role of leading SEO at Razorfish, for sort of the entire offering in the US. And I think what it taught me a lot is obviously a lot on sort of the culture that I think people thrive in, which is this openness, the ability for everyone's voice to be heard, finding ways to surface ideas, but really how we think about like scaling offerings, how we think about showing up consistently, because when you do it well, you have, this is a small industry, right? So when people move on and they want to work with you again, they want that same experience, even if the people they're not working with are the same. And that was a learning very early on when I was managing. Is a client went on to another place, came back to work with us, and kind of came to me and say, Ray, like, this is very different from the last time I worked with you guys. It's just like, it's really like, driving consistency in that offering. So I think what it taught me is how to build a service offering, how to build teams, how to build culture, and how to sort of, drive that sort of focus on delivering, but over delivering, and sort of delighting clients in that role of building out that practice in sort of the agency world.
Yeah. No, that's a great story. And I think one of the things that when you started talking, you were talking about walking into your boss's office and saying, okay, here's a problem, but here's how we fix it. And I think even though most of us would probably not want to admit that we would use the word problem, we'd use the word opportunity, but
Yeah.
every business, large or small, service business, advertising business, product business, everything has an opportunity for an individual to come in and say, hey, why do we do it this way? Could we do it this way? Let's try this. And I think to your point that it's a great learning for people earlier in their careers to know that they can go to their manager and say, hey, why is it this way? Can we try it this way? Because managers, we love to hear that. We love to see that initiative and that what if thinking. And then to your point, the burden on us as managers is to create that culture where this is a safe space to come in with those ideas. Let's try it. Let's make something better. Let's fix a problem occasionally, but let's make things better. And as your point, let's scale the business. So I want to piggyback that a little bit because as you grew into these much more senior roles at Publicis, a few years ago, obviously you decided to make this change to go to Klick to head all of Klick, Media. What are some of the things that drew you to Klick, and what are some of those learnings from a really successful career at Publicis that you're hoping to, to translate and to help to, build Klick to be that kind of a practice?
Yeah. I mean, I think what really gets me out of bed is building teams, building business, building, solutions in the marketplace. And I think also that sort of dedicated focus to healthcare. I think, healthcare marketing for me is such a puzzle. There's no other industry where a marketer has to market to two separate audiences that have two different sets of priorities, and hope when they talk for 15 minutes, they have a conversation that's well informed and it results in your client's product. Oh, by the way, like it has to be, they have to have the coverage to actually afford it. So there's all these friction points that I think become this amazing puzzle for us to solve. And, I am somewhat obsessed with solving that. So I think what one of the things that drew me to Klick is just their focus on healthcare, their dedication to healthcare. And it's not to say we weren't focused on that in Publicis, but this is obviously, as an organization, they're collectively focused on that. I think the second thing is the opportunity to sort of bring things back together. When we launched Publicis Health Media, it was really pulling search and media out of the full service agencies and sort of standing it up as its own media practice. And that at the time was the trend. Consolidation of media and consolidating buying power for negotiation rates was a big trend at the moment because we were coming out of, the downturn in 2008 and you saw that movement. So bringing that back together, especially as you're talking about omnichannel and understanding the reliance on strategy and creative, to actually do omnichannel really well, that was super desirable. I think overall, finally, like the big thing is just like, I love to build teams and solutions, and the opportunity to take, a really good team and sort of bring them together and really try to bring that offering to the next level, just really appealing to me. And I was at a point at PHM where I felt like I did everything that I set out to do, and I was just really looking for that next challenge.
Well, you've worked at a great company, as we both know, in Publicis, and now you're leading another great one with Klick. And I have no doubt you'll make Klick Media a force. So hang on, Ray. We need to take a quick break. Coming up next time on Coming About, Ray Rosti, President of Media at Klick Health, shares why healthcare marketing must reach every generation, from boomers through to Gen Z.
We think about it just from a consumer perspective, but here's the scary thing for us in this industry is the oldest Gen Z is like 27, 28. That's when you start your residency. So we're heading into a world where there's going to be 4 different generational cohorts diagnosing and prescribing, right? They couldn't have wildly different media behaviors, and their media behaviors translate regardless of what their job is, right?
This has been Coming About. We hope these conversations have left you feeling empowered and ready to take your organization to the next level. To speak with Dave about your business transformation or to learn more about Health Monitor Network, go to healthmonitornetwork.com. And don't forget to check out his book, Coming About: How We Transformed a Major Media Company and the Lessons There for You. Available wherever books are sold. Coming About with David Paragamian is a production of Advantage Audio.